Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers, where we are going through the entire GameCube library and picking out some of the games that don't get much love that you may have missed. As there is a considerably smaller library for the system compared to others, we're only looking at 3 games per letter. And really, what else do you need to know? Here we've got a few games starting with the letters D, E and F that you may have missed. And you know what? There's some pretty damn good ones in here too. So, how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and we take a look at some games. First up is Dinotopia, the Sunstone Odyssey, based on a book and TV series that I've never seen, but I have heard of, and I remember seeing trailers for the TV show, and it looked crap. The game here puts you into the dino leather-clad boots of Drake Gemini. You've been living on the land of Dinotopia for about 10 years now after crash landing there with your brother Jacob and your father. Turns out in Dinotopia there is a magic plant thing that lets things live lots longer than they should. And over the years a bunch of humans have ended up in Dinotopia and are living in harmony with the dinosaurs who have survived. Oh, and also some of the dinosaurs can talk as well. Why not? Anyway, one day your dad is eaten by one of the evil meat-eating dinosaurs. This divides you and your brother, with you wanting to become a protector of the land, who protects the villages and land from these sorts of attacks, whereas your brother decides to be an outsider, a clan of humans that hate dinosaurs and want to wipe them all out. The game sees you exploring Dinotopia, fighting outsiders and evil dinosaurs, and completing missions. The main thing you need to do is track down the Sunstones, which give the island its power before the outsiders do. It's a fine generic story, and it really is kind of dragged out in the cutscenes, which go on for far too long. They could have summarised most of what happens a lot quicker. The actual gameplay is a fairly standard third-person action game. You run around with your staff fighting enemies. These range from other humans to huge dinosaurs, which really helps the game stand out. You do have a few combos, and as you fight you gain experience, which unlocks new combos for you to use. You'll meet other good characters, sometimes human, sometimes dinosaur, and they'll give you side quests, though these are basically always fetch quests where you just need to find something for them. The actual levels are very linear, with only a couple of paths you can follow, but you can revisit them whenever you want to pick up anything that you might have missed. The things you'll need to find for people are always in one area though, so it does mean you will do a lot of running back and forth on some empty levels, and enemies they don't respawn, so it can get a little dull. But doing these side missions will get you extra stones to put into your weapon. This gives it more power, magic or speed for attacks. These aren't needed, but can make combat easier. It's not too tough though, you just basically do a combo, then hold the block button until the enemy attacks, and repeat. I don't think I ever actually died because of the combat. They do mix things up every now and then though with flying sections, which is nice, and you do get a variety of stages. Now the actual objectives are basically the same on every one, fight things and find things, but I think my love for dinosaurs meant that I enjoyed this more than most people probably will. New ones are introduced all the time, and I loved seeing all the new dinosaurs as they came along. You even get to pilot a dino mech at one point. Now the game really isn't perfect though, it is repetitive and can be pretty boring if you play for more than a level or two at a time. Also, it has some of the worst voice acting I've ever heard. It's by Billy West, the guy who plays Fry & Co in Futurama. He is doing the worst accent I've ever heard here, and I can't tell if he's trying to be Scottish or Irish. It doesn't look too bad though, fairly standard for the era. So I'd say that if you can deal with a bit of jank and you love dinosaurs, then you could do a lot worse than this game. But if you like your games polished and kind of fun, this might not be for you. Next is Dead to Rights from Namco. Here you play as Jack Slate, which is the most 2000s action hero name I've ever heard. You're a copper, and you're called to an incident where it turns out that your dear old dad has been murdered by mobsters. So as you'd expect, the game is a tale of revenge where you find out who killed your dear old dad, and most importantly, find them and kill them in the face. Turns out there's a massive gang war going on, and now you're in the middle of it. So it's basically an all-out action game. Your mission on every level is just to get to the end of it, while waves of enemies run in for you to blow to bits. You'll explore construction sites, graveyards, city blocks, nightclubs, penthouses, and a bunch of other places that you'd expect to see in a John Wick film. The gameplay really does just revolve around combat, and luckily it is really good fun. You can carry a few guns at a time, and the game lets you lock onto enemies to blast them. You also have a dive move, which of course makes everything go slowly, as this was around the time that Max Payne came out, so you'll be able to get your bullet time fix here. This makes it even easier to take out large numbers of enemies though. When you're locked onto an enemy, you get a coloured reticle, which basically tells you your chances of hitting them. Green means no chance, yellow is kind of 50-50, and if it's red, it basically means you're going to murder them immediately. You'll get pistols, shotguns, machine guns, and every other type of gun that you'd expect. You can switch weapons when you're out of ammo, and most of the time you're not going to be too fussed about what weapon you're using, thanks to the generous lock-on mechanics, though you can manually aim if you want to, and at times you will want to. There's a fairly hefty hand-to-hand combat system here as well, which you really want to get used to, as there's plenty of levels that actually rely on it. You've got a punch and kick button and can do a decent number of combos, and you can also grab and throw enemies. As well as this, there's a dedicated button that you can use to grab people and use them as a human shield. Once they've run out of use, you can just blast them in the head in a pretty brutal close range way. And you also have a dedicated disarm button, which I really love. You basically have to rely on stealing enemy weapons if you want to keep your ammo count up, so sometimes you'll need to sneak around disarming bad guys rather than going in guns blazing, and I really like the disarm animations as well, it looks really cool. There's also mini-games here, things like needing to pick locks, and what is probably the most surprising one is that you have a mini-game where you see Jack's stripper friend, and you have to play a rhythm game to get her to do a sexy dance while wearing basically nothing to distract guards so Jack can run past. I'm pretty sure this is the only case of something like this on a Nintendo family-friendly console. Honestly, I can't believe they actually let this stay in the game. Something I haven't mentioned is that one of the best things about the game is that you have a dog friend, Shadow. On most levels, Shadow is with you, and he can be commanded to attack enemies, killing them in just one hit. But this needs time to recharge. Shadow can also disarm bad guys and bring you their weapons, and at times you actually take control directly of him and can use the dog to run around and get into areas that Jack can't get into, as he's just not that nimble. These sections are always just the right length and help to break up the gameplay, and it never gets old having Shadow rip an enemy's jugular out. And the good news is that Shadow can never be killed. Even dirty mobsters have morals when it comes to dogs in this world. This is another game that can get a little repetitive if you're playing it for long sessions, as it is basically just kill everyone and move into the next room and repeat. There are light puzzle sections, but that's basically just a case of finding a switch and not a whole lot else. Graphics wise, it's fine, again nothing major and very standard for the time, but it does the job and it does have good animation. Overall, it's just a fun game to play. It's got good combat, fun gunfights, and an awesome dog. Definitely one that I would recommend. Next up is what is one of the strangest licensed games that I've played. It's Darkened Skye. You play as Skye, a woman, and you live in a fantasy realm where colour has been outlawed, and anyone or anything that's too bright and colourful is hunted down and destroyed. For some reason, a portal thing opens, in fact quite a few of them do, and colourful things start falling from the sky. And can you guess what they are? Yes, that's right, Skittles, as in the sweet, or candy, depending on where you live. Skittles. It starts to rain a rainbow, so the colour-hating monsters have a proper fit. You meet a good goblin guy, and together go on an adventure to get the Skittles, so you can put them on an amulet thing that you happen to be given by your mother, and get rid of the colour-hating bastards once and for all. And I'm guessing you'll probably find out what happened to your mother, as she mysteriously disappeared at some point. The game is a third-person action-adventure game, and it really reminds me of the Alice Madness Returns game if you've ever played that, or whatever the first one was called. You visit a number of different worlds, each with a different coloured Skittle that you need to find, and each world gets more and more surreal. I actually really like the look of everything here though, even if the gameplay is a bit wonky to go along with it. It's all a mixture of puzzles, platforming and combat. The camera is fixed behind you at all times, and the game controls more like a first-person shooter than an action 3D platformer, if you know what I mean. You have no control over the camera at all. There's enemies all over the place that you can fight with your magic staff. These games love a magic staff, don't they? Hammering the L button makes you attack, though it is quite clunky as the enemies don't react too much when you hit them, and they will hit you through your attacks. Also, you can't block, which doesn't really help. Thankfully, you get a number of magic attacks you can use, including ranged ones. These are helpful and your mana constantly replenishes, so as long as you're patient, it's not too hard to get rid of most enemies. You'll need coloured skittles to use magic though, and different combinations of different colours enable the different attacks and powers. This is the game's way of not letting you just use all of the magic all of the time. You need to pick and choose what ones to activate based on the colours that you have, as each skittle can only be used once at a time, though you can swap them in and out without losing them, which is nice. There's a lot of platforming here, and this is probably the toughest thing about the game, as it is pretty loose and not all that great. Now the controls are actually quite good for it, and you can control yourself in the air, which really helps. The problem is how your character moves. It's kind of hard to explain without playing it, but basically any bump in the ground will affect your ability to jump, and often running and jumping means you just sort of slide forward, usually to your death, rather than jumping properly. Again, it makes more sense when you're playing it. This is the main thing that reminded me of the Alice game too. It's like they were built in the same engine, which they might have been, I'm too stupid to know. There's a lot of cutscenes here, and the game actually has a really strange feel to it. It never takes itself seriously and is very self-referential, with characters often talking about the script that they're reading and the fact that you're just playing a game. It's kind of strange, but I did like it. It's also pretty cryptic, only giving you vague clues as to what you need to do, and you will want to pay attention to every cutscene, as that's basically where you're told what to do and need to do, and even what most of the items do, though the menus can come in handy. Graphically it looks alright, geometry is kinda jaggy, but I do like the designs on everything. Oh, and you know we saw some strippers in the GameCube just now, well this game definitely has topless women in it. Granted they are fish women, but look at this, definitely fish women's tits. And this is a game for kids about fucking sweets. I mean, it's about sweets, not about, you know what I mean. But yeah, as well as being super sexy, this is also one that I find really interesting. It's definitely not a bad game, but also it's not going to blow you away. I will say that something I love about it is that you can save any time through the pause menu, and you will want to do this as there's a ton of instant death areas. So yeah, if you like a dodgy challenge or are happy to play this game with a guide, then I think there is some wacky fun to be had. A game for kids that doesn't involve naked fish women is Ed, Edd and Eddy: The Misadventures. This is a 3D puzzle platform game based on the Cartoon Network series that I used to enjoy watching before Dexter's Lab came on. The game is split into different levels, which are basically different episodes, so each one has its own plot that's not connected to any of the previous ones, other than the fact that it's some kind of scam that those Ed, Edd and Eddy bastards are always putting up with. Most involve some sort of money-making venture, like needing to find ingredients to make a snow cone to sell. One sees you trying to break into a party that you weren't invited to. One sees you just trying to get to a sweet shop before it runs out of the new jawbreakers that you want to try. That sort of thing. This is all done in the usual 3D platforming way. You'll explore some pretty large levels, each of which can take an hour or so to get through on your first try. You'll need to interact with the environment to collect the various items that are needed either for the level's objectives, or you might come across hidden items that unlock bonus content like extra levels, artwork and that sort of thing. As there's 3 main characters, you get to play as all 3 of them, though this is only a single player game. And you can switch between the different Eds at any point with the press of a button, and yep, each one has his own abilities. Now, I've never been sure which one of the Eds is which, and this game didn't really help with that, as it doesn't say the name of them anywhere, you just get a picture of the one that you're controlling, but that's alright. People with more brain cells than me will likely just look it up. Anyway, one of the Eds, the tall one, is strong, so can pick up and carry things that the other 2 can't. You'll need to throw stuff around and smash certain things with it, and the one with the hat is good with tech, so he can interact with the various devices around the levels like vehicles, switches and so on. And then there's the one that looks like a deformed baby, who has stink bombs that you can use to stun enemies. And there are a few enemies here, mostly just things like rats and other animals, and really they're more there just to be a nuisance than actual proper threat. Each character has a regular attack that you can do as well. As well as this, there's team-up moves. There's 3 different ones, depending on the character that you're in control of. One lets you throw the other character across gaps or really high into the air, which basically acts as a super jump to get to high areas or across larger gaps. There's one that is basically a battering ram, where you human centipede the 3 of you together, and the one at the front's head will smash certain things. And then the last one is where you'll jump on each other's shoulders like a tower. This lets you reach items that are high up or cross platforms that would drop after one character touches them, that sort of thing. Levels revolve around using all of the abilities of all of the characters here, and you can access any previous levels through the cul-de-sac, which acts as the hub area. You're just going around the neighbourhood, but the levels are surprisingly varied, and some puzzles will require a bit of trial and error. It does have its fair share of jank though, of course, and the controls are the main culprit. Now they do work, and the game is never too challenging, but sometimes things wouldn't really register properly, and often when the jumping and teaming up abilities were being used, I was never sure if they were going to work properly. But it didn't really matter, as the game doesn't really give you any kind of time limit, and there's no bottomless pits here or anything like that. If you do ever get stuck though, just cycle through the characters, and eventually you'll see something you can interact with get highlighted. It looks pretty good though, with a nice cel-shaded look that really matches the series, and I like the weird designs on everything here. It's got some nice animation too, and there's even some decent physics-based stuff in here as well. It's not really a game you'll likely come back to once you've finished it, but it is fun for what it is. Time to hit the slopes now with Evolution Snowboarding, or if you want, Evolution Snowboarding. Guess what? It's a snowboarding game, but it's even more extreme than some of the other ones out there, almost being like Road Rash on snowboards. It's got a daft story that you can basically ignore. You get an email telling you to check out a mountain, where it turns out a bunch of evil snowboarders are doing strange things. So for some reason you have to haul ass down there to the various courses, completing objectives and eventually finding the boss of each area and smashing their face in with a baseball bat. You get to customize your own character at the start, and then you've got a handful of locations on the mountain that need to be unlocked. To do this, you start with the one that's open, obviously, and you've got 10 missions within it to complete. These range from getting to the end in a certain amount of time, or fighting enemies and needing to kill a certain number of them before you reach the end, collecting items that have been dropped, or sometimes a combination of all of the above. The variety isn't wild, but it is enough, and none of them go on for too long, so you won't get particularly bored with them. Once you've done enough, the boss level will open, and this is just a fight where you have to take down the boss before you reach the end of the level or the timer runs out. All stages have an unlimited number of enemies. Thankfully you can punch and kick and even throw the bastards. Different buttons do different attacks, and you've got a couple of combos you can do as well. You'll also find weapons on the slopes. You get baseball bats, chains, swords and that sort of thing. You can carry 2 weapons at a time, one in each hand, which is nice, as depending on where the enemy is, you'll need to use a certain hand. And you really want to get the weapons when you can, as they are much more powerful, and the range on them is a lot better than your fists and feet. Killing people and completing objectives gets you points. You can spend these points on upgrading your character to make them faster, stronger, and have a better turning and so on. You'll also find new boards and costumes hidden on the courses as well, which is nice. You do unlock other characters to play as that aren't your custom one. You can play as any character you've unlocked during the story mode, but there are certain missions that do require you to use your custom character so it can all progress. But it's nice that you're not forced to play as just the same person the whole time. The variety in the courses is decent, and pretty much what you expect in a game like this. It's got a variety of slopes, with some being generic ones, one is a forest-based one, you get a castle theme, and so on. They all basically play the same, but you know, that's alright, it's snowboarding. You can do tricks here, but they are very limited, and other than giving you extra points, they don't really do a whole lot. I actually found that I never really bothered using them, as the controls on them aren't all that good, and I never needed to do them to finish a mission. The rest of the controls are good though, and I never had any trouble controlling my character as I was going down the slopes. It all looks alright, though nothing special. Some of the character designs are cool, but you likely won't remember many of them once the game's been shut off. Still, this is a fun game that reminds me a lot of Dark Summit that you'll all remember from my snowboarding games video from a while back. And if you do like snowboarding and smacking people in the face, then you should give this a go. Evolution Worlds is a cool little RPG thing from Sega that's exclusive to the GameCube. You play as a punk kid who comes from a long line of adventurers who can use things called Scythes, robotic add-ons that help them fight and grab things, I suppose. One day while you're out doing your adventure stuff, a not so subtly evil military man shows up talking about the mysterious place called Evolvia, which holds a load of treasure and power. Things happen, and basically you need to get there before he does. Now, this is one of those RPGs where you've got one hub world where you can go around and gather your party of characters, and then you go to the Adventure Guild who will tell you where the dungeons you can go to are. There's no big open world or anything here, and it's all quite linear. You can have up to 3 people in your party. You always have 2 of the same character. There's Mag and Linnea, who are both the main characters. Oh, and everyone here has a stupid name, by the way. Mag is your standard adventurer. He's got basic attacks and is essentially a warrior. Instead of a sword though, he has a robotic arm. Linnea is your healer. She's weak but has access to a lot of magic that can help your party by attacking, healing or giving buffs. Then as you play, you meet a handful of other characters, many of which will be the third person in your party. Each one has different attacks and plays as the various typical RPG type people. So you've got a sexy woman that has a Mega Man style arm, she's the really powerful one and basically only has attacks and no buffs. You've got your butler, who is awesome by the way. He can join your party and has a whole range of attacks, as well as being able to serve you meals that give buffs, heal you or poison enemies. It's all simple enough, but there is a pretty big variety in the characters and picking the right ones for the dungeon can make them easier to get through. The dungeons themselves are all fairly similar in design, mostly being maze-like affairs, where you just need to find the staircase to the next floor. Once you've gotten to the top, you'll fight the boss. Of course, you don't always want to immediately rush to the stairs, even if you find them early on. You will want to explore every inch of every floor, partly because none of them are that large, but also because you'll find chests with items that you might need, particularly healing items or potions that can cure poison and so on. Then there's a ton of monsters in the dungeons as well. There's no random battles though. Instead, you'll see the monster and you have to touch it to start the battle, at which point you might fight just one, or there might be 2 or 3 enemies to fight. If you manage to touch the enemy from behind, like Toby Von Doom likes to do, you'll take it by surprise and get a few extra turns before the enemy attacks. And likewise, they do the same to you, so watch out. And yeah, it's all turn-based, so you just choose what you want to do from the menu and watch it all pan out. I actually really enjoyed the battles here. It's all simple enough for someone like me who rarely plays games like this, and I'd say it's a pretty good introductory game for the genre. It can get tricky though, and you will need to keep an eye on item management and make sure you're keeping your party healthy. Between dungeons you do get a lot of cutscenes, and these can drag on for way too long. The story takes itself quite seriously, and although it does look cute and cuddly, it is quite in-depth, and I did find I skipped a lot of these after a short while. As you play, you'll also level up, unlocking more and more attacks and making your characters stronger. What's cool is you earn points and you can always see what attacks and spells you need to unlock. Then you use these points that you earn to do so. So if you want to, you can ignore the cheap stuff and just save up to get the more powerful attacks. That's a nice idea, but be careful as some of the cheaper ones can be really handy still, and the more expensive ones use more mana, so if you're weak, you might only be able to use it once per fight. Overall, I had a lot of fun playing this, and ended up playing it for way longer than I expected, even when I was just wanting to record some footage, nearly 3 hours in fact. It's not particularly deep or original, but it's good fun. Another cartoon tie-in now with Fairly Odd Parents' Shadow Showdown. This one is based on a cartoon that I've never seen before, and the only exposure I've had to the series is playing one of the games on the Game Boy Advance. There is a daft story here which I'm guessing fits the surreal humour of the show. Basically, you want to watch your favourite TV show, but your TV breaks. You try to get your magic godparents, or whatever they are, to fix it with their magic, but their wands are suddenly broken. There's a silly reason for this, so you have to visit a bunch of wacky worlds in order to collect magic stars to power their wand. All this to fix a TV. But hey, it is actually fun to play, so that's alright. You'll never guess, but this is a 3D platform game with light combat and puzzle elements. You visit some pretty large worlds which are all connected by a hub, and they each have a number of stars you need to collect in them. What's fun is that by collecting 3 stars of the same colour, you'll unlock one of that level's abilities. There's 3 abilities to lock on each stage, and you'll need to switch between these to complete whatever objectives or puzzles that you've got. The abilities you get range from things that let you attack, some that let you fly, some that let you pick things up from a distance, one that turns you into a literal cow magnet, and so on. They're all pretty surreal, and I did enjoy seeing what was coming up in each of the worlds. And the levels themselves are suitably strange as well, and they're all full of strange magic and creatures. There's a superhero themed one, a film noir one, crazy car themed levels. In one of them you go inside someone's dream, and more. They're all very different and have a different feel to them. I really like that. For example, the superhero level is flooded and requires a lot more precise platforming than some of the other levels, and one of the levels has noticeably more enemies in it, that sort of thing. It does a good job of making you want to see what's coming up next. The actual puzzles aren't particularly troubling, it's just a case of exploring until you've found enough stars to unlock an ability. Then, using that ability, you will be able to access new areas of the level to get the rest of the stars, and so on. But it isn't always straightforward, and there were times where I'd be wandering around, figuring out what to do. The levels are also quite well designed, with shortcuts that you can unlock as you play, so backtracking is kept to a minimum. There's also coins scattered around everywhere. You can use these in the shop to buy gadgets that actually really help out. You get things like a coin multiplier, new weapons, and even a device that points out where the star bits you need are. You can replay levels if you want to as well, to collect extra coins if you need to do some farming to get some stuff quickly. And you might want to do that, as the controls here are decent and actually playing the game is really good fun. It's responsive, and usually when something goes wrong you only really have yourself to blame. My only real complaint is that sometimes the levels can seem to drag on a bit, and really it can be a bit similar in that you need to just find stars, use powers to get new stars, and so on. But the varied levels and powers do help, to be fair. Oh, and something that really does start to grate on your nerves are the fairy god people. They won't shut up, and they have something to say every few seconds. This wouldn't be too bad, but man, their voices are so annoying, and I really just wanted them to shut the hell up and press that oh wait, that's a different line. Anyway, the game looks good. Again, it's a cel-shaded one, and I really do have a soft spot for some good cel shading. The crazy designs also make it fun to see what's going to be in each level. This is another game that is very much a middle-of-the-road one that you know they churned out probably pretty quickly. However, it does have some really cool moments in it, and is one that I really enjoyed playing quite a lot. There is another game in the series on the GameCube as well. I haven't tried that one, but I would quite like to now. Here is Freedom Fighters. This is an excellent third-person action game, and another one that I played the hell out of while I was in college. In fact, this game would probably be in my top 10 GameCube games, but I really don't know anyone else that's played it. The story is basically Red Dawn. You play as a realistic Mario, a plumber working in Middle America, and then one day you go to a job with your brother, but you can't find the client, who happens to be a sexy woman. All of a sudden, some Russian soldiers burst in and attack you. Turns out they've invaded America, and the woman is the head of some sort of resistance that knew about it, or something like that. Long story short, you manage to escape and find some freedom fighters who you join. Then it's up to you to take back your beloved country so you can have a cheeseburger. You have a few missions to play through that take you all through the city. You tend to have 2 or 3 missions available at any one time, each with their own objectives. These are mainly to destroy something, capture a building, kill the enemies that are occupying an area, that sort of thing. But what's really cool is that you can use the sewer system to move between each of the locations that they're at, and things you do in one location probably will impact things in another location. For example, in one of the areas there's a bunch of snipers that make it basically impossible to be out in the open. However, if you travel to one of the other locations which has its own objectives, while you're there, you can find a way to blow up the building that they're hiding in. Then when you go back to the other mission, you're free to run around wherever you want without being sniped. You're not forced to do this, but it will make your life a whole lot easier. On another level, there's enemy tanks and choppers, so what you can do is explore the other mission areas and destroy the fuel depots that you find. Then when you go back to the other area, there's fewer or sometimes no enemy vehicles at all. It's a really cool idea, and figuring out this stuff is really satisfying. Of course, you can always just brute force your way through levels, and it is possible, but why make it harder for yourself? Also, by doing these things, you earn what is essentially XP, and you'll level up. The higher your level, the more little dots you have under your health bar. These are the spaces for your freedom fighters that you can recruit to go with you into missions, also making things easier. These guys can be given orders to kill enemies, defend areas, explore ahead, or just stick with you and make sure you don't get shot in the face. They're actually very helpful, and you can get quite attached to them. If one of them does die in the line of duty, there's no real penalty other than it gets a bit harder, but you can find new men hidden throughout the levels, and as long as you have enough space in your team, they'll join you. And you will need them, as this game is really actually very difficult. You can only take a few bullets to the face before dying, and staying somewhere near cover and using your teammates is essential if you're going to survive. You get a few weapons, the usual lot. You got pistols, machine guns, shotguns, etc. There is a decent auto-aim system when you're close to enemies, and I do recommend using that, but for long range you will want to aim down your sights. This is a little strange as the camera doesn't immediately move with your crosshair, and it can feel a little slow, but you'll get used to it. You get other items and health kits, which you have to use manually as well, so do keep an eye on your health. The main reason for this though is that you can also use your health kits to heal your teammates, as well as any injured civilians and freedom fighters that you come across along the missions. Doing this will also give you XP, so it's worth helping as many people as you can, so you end up with a little army going around with you. The game looks good, but not really anything special. It's very grey and brown like a lot of games of the era, but it suits the gritty style of everything. The controls will be what take the longest to get used to. They do work fine, don't get me wrong, but the aiming is a bit slow and the jumping and climbing can sometimes be a bit dodgy. However, that does not stop this from being a really cool game. I do love it. It also came out on the PS2, Xbox and PC, though I've never played any of those versions. I would go out on a limb though to say that you should get a copy for whatever system you can, and it's a game that I would love to see get a sequel, or even a Night Dive Studios remaster would suit me.
Stand your ground. Let's go. Let's go. Can't take these bars much longer. Thanks. Get us back to the sewers, quick. Reds will be crawling all.
And finally for today, here is Frogger's Adventures: The Rescue. That's right, it's another update of Frogger. There's quite a few of these over the previous systems, and I would quite like to take a look at this series as a whole at some point, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Here, a spaceship comes down and crashes near where you live. Turns out these are some good guys though, and they're part of a space team that go around rescuing creatures. Frogger ends up joining them, and that's the reason you end up going around a whole bunch of different worlds, jumping about like a twat, collecting coins, and getting to the end of every level. Now, if you've ever played the original Frogger, then you know exactly what to expect. Frogger can jump one square at a time, and you'll need to keep tapping the direction you want to move. You can't hold down the button constantly to move here. At first it is a bit annoying, but actually the reason for this is that Frogger is a pussy, and basically everything kills him in one hit. I don't know why they hired him. There's enemies all over the place. They are basically just other animals, and really they're not actually enemies, as they don't directly attack you most of the time. They just wander about minding their own business in a pattern, but if you touch them, you die. Also, most of the environment will kill you as well, including water, which is pretty dumb, but who cares, it's a video game. You can use these shoulder buttons to turn around on the spot, and at times you will need to do this as there's items to collect, as well as levers to pull, buttons to press, and even boxes to push and pull around. This is normally done using your tongue, which you can use at any time by pressing B. You can use it to grab coins that are out of the way as well. And of course, getting enough coins means you get an extra life, which is nice, as the game is pretty damn challenging. There's hazards everywhere, though most of the time you don't have a time limit, so you can plan your moves. However, there are plenty of platforms that will fall away or move that you need to rush over. Also, there are sections of the game where you're being chased. These can be really tough, as you need to remember to use your super jump by pressing A, which lets you jump over 2 squares at a time. You even have boss fights here, and these are actually quite fun. You can't attack, so they are more puzzle based, and you need to figure out what you need to do to take the bastards down, which is sometimes easier said than done. Something that I do quite like here is that there's a lot of callbacks to the original Frogger game here. There's sections that mirror the arcade game with traffic and logs, and these parts in particular seem to be very tricky, and while the game can get frustrating, it does also have that addictive just one more try quality to it. It also looks pretty good. It's got a nice cartoony feel to everything, and I do like the designs they've used here. I mean, it's not going to blow you away or anything, but it is nice to have some colour after playing Freedom Fighters. So yeah, if you like an arcade challenge, then this one might be one you want to try. So there you go, even more hidden gems for the GameCube that you might not have tried. Which one is your favourite? As always, let me know in the comments below. I want to say a big thank you to my patron, and you too can be a sexy bastard patron, where I have even more content, including reviews too hot for YouTube, podcasts, gaming challenges, and more. Links are in the description below. On screen now you can see where you can follow me, so why not do so? I've got plenty of great content for everyone to enjoy. And now all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.